Okay, if the doc's calculations are correct, then a portal to Dr. Cameron Smith of Portland State University is going to show up right here in about 10 seconds. So get ready for some Cathlapotle plank house history that will blow your mind.
Hello everyone, I'm Cameron Smith. I'm an archaeologist at Portland State University. And this year the theme is Back to the Refuge. Well, I'm very lucky. I've been coming back here since 1991 when my first trip out here looking for the Cathlapotle Village site. And also talking about the return to things. You know, we have time and space. And one way that we recognize time is change. If nothing has changed, in some ways you can say that nothing has happened, no time has passed. A big portion of the change that we're working on now with the archaeology on the refuge is away from what we used to do and towards a new direction, which is landscape archaeology. And you might just think that this is a dried up edge of a small lake, but actually this is an archaeological site. Each of these objects has been mapped down to the centimeter, and it takes time and training to learn what you're looking at. But here, for example, is a large boulder that really doesn't belong here. What I mean by that is that the particles that have been moved here by water, very fine silt particles, they can't possibly move anything this large. And that tells us, or at least that's one beginning of a clue, that somebody has actually brought this object here. Now, we look at, of course, in archaeology, how old things are. And one way to get a date, like how long ago was it that this was put here, would be to excavate into the ground and find some charcoal. And we're not going to excavate today, going underneath the rock even. I don't want to disturb it. But I happen to have a nice piece of charcoal with me right here. Obviously, charcoal, you can think of radiocarbon dating. You've probably heard of radiocarbon dating. It's this incredible way to determine when this piece of wood died. And if that piece of charcoal was properly associated with this rock, and if I know that it was laid down into the ground at the same time that the rock was, or near about that, that can help us a lot in telling how long ago was this artifact put into the ground. Now, as we move along the beach here, this dried lake, you can find a mix of objects. Over my shoulder, you can see some wooden pilings. That was from a little fishing structure that was out here for a while. Made probably in the last 100 years or so, and it looks as though they dumped some cobbles here onto the ground. There are a lot of little bits of gravel that they probably dumped here to make a sort of platform to step on. However, mixed in with that are artifacts from much longer ago. Here, for example, is a cobble that's been split right down the middle. It's a very common type of artifact that we find inside village sites. But this one is laying out here on the landscape. And once you're trained properly, you can tell where this has been struck. And there are all kinds of ripples and signals, really, visual signals to you that tell you that this is an object made by a human being. Now, continuing along, we're finding different kinds of artifacts. Sometimes here you see these rounded rocks, and those are river cobbles. But again, they don't belong here. There's not enough energy moving around here, just bringing around this silt and mud to move those blocks of stone without lots of other ones. So that's a suggestion also that these were brought. And some of them, of course, you can pick them up and you can see there's wear patterning on them. There's damage to them. They've been used as a hammer or an anvil. And with an object like that, you expect sometimes, well, is it really an artifact? We expect an artifact to be symmetrical. For example, here's a pretty much symmetrical fish pounding tool, and it's used to process fish. But this is the kind of thing that you find inside a house. They've put so much energy into making this, they keep it where they can always find it and not lose track of it. Outdoors, typically, you find more expedient objects, things that people use a few times. They leave it in a place on the landscape, but if they lose it, it's not such a big problem. Now, we see these rounded objects, those round river cobbles, but look here, here's something completely different. That's not a river cobble. That's a piece of angular columnar basalt. That's a piece of basalt that's cracked away from a cliff. And I think I know a good candidate site for this a few miles away, where there are cliffs and these blocks, these angular pieces are broken off and falling down. So this may well have been transported a few miles from the outcrop over there. I'm going to bring it closer and you can have a close look at the edge. And you can see that there are several little divots here. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. And to the trained eye, you can tell that those have been struck off the edge. That doesn't happen naturally. A human being has gone in with a hammerstone, very, very lightly knocked that edge off, made it a little bit sharper, and ended up using this probably as some kind of a chopping tool. Well, here we are. This is the last rock at this end of the site. And the scatter of rocks extends about 50 yards. And here we are at the last one. There's nothing beyond this. And in fact, we walked the entire perimeter now that it's dry, and we made sure that there's nothing else around here. So we have a localized spot. It's a resource patch. It's a place that people came for a particular resource. One of those resources might have been freshwater mussels. Look at that. You notice all the divots here on the ground? Those are otter tracks. They're here for these. People will well have come here for these as well. Last thing to say about landscape archaeology that we're doing now is that it leaves no trace. Once I've pulled these flags and we finished our documentation, the site is back to exactly how it was. There's no digging, and we're not bringing back thousands of artifacts to a lab, which now have to be curated and studied for years and years. As they used to say, take only photographs, leave only footprints. Well, thanks very much for watching. We'll be back next year with more of the archaeology and the cultural landscape around the Cathlapotle Village and the Cathlapotle Plains.